The 49ers have placed Christian McCaffrey, the reigning Offensive Player of the Year, on injured reserve. CMC will not be available for the NFC champs for at least the next 4 games. What does this mean for the 49ers? What does this mean for your fantasy football team? And what does this mean for Christian McCaffrey? In this reaction, I'm going to break it down for the 49ers, for the NFC West, for the NFC, and all of the above. So let me know in the comments. Let me know in the live chat what you guys think. CMC, IR. He's dealing with some Achilles tendonitis, which personally I have never experienced. I don't know how painful that might be. Obviously, we know, though, that the Achilles is very delicate. So just off the bat, I feel like this approach by the 49ers to be conservative, to take their time, to allow McCaffrey to properly rest and properly get the treatment that he needs to come back at 100% is the right move. We saw already how Mason played against the Jets and how effective he could be on the ground. And personally, as good as McCaffrey is, which I would say he's the best running back in football by a long shot, I would also argue that he's probably at least a top 10 player in the NFL. But the running back position is unique because the running back position is one, it's not like quarterback, where if you are missing your quarterback, for 4 weeks, you probably are going to really suffer in the standings, in the win-losses. You're probably going to really hurt your chances of going to the playoffs. If you're missing a running back, specifically in Kyle Shanahan's offense and Kyle Shanahan's system, where he can get an undrafted guy or a guy off the street and put him in the backfield and make him productive, then it's not as big of a deal. Now, will he be as good as McCaffrey? Obviously not. There's a reason they traded for Christian McCaffrey, right? Because he is special, because he can do so many different things, because he is the perfect running back for that system. But we've seen Raheem Mostert. We've seen Jeff Wilson. We've seen Matt Breida. We've seen all these guys. Mason now. We've seen Elijah Mitchell. We've seen all these running backs figure it out and be able to go back there and run the football and gash defenses left and right. They just played arguably one of the top 3 to 5 defenses in football last week, the Jets, and they bullied them and they ran all over them and they made a statement. So let's just say that McCaffrey is out for the next 4 games, right? That would mean that he misses the games against the Vikings tomorrow, obviously in Minnesota, which could be a sneaky tough game. Now, I would still think the Niners win that game, but being that the Vikings did beat the Niners last year, different quarterbacks, but they did beat them last year, that could be tougher than imagined. Vikings looked good in week 1. Who knows? The Rams in Los Angeles and the current form that the Rams are in, they look good in week 1, but they are very beat up, specifically on their offensive line. No Puka Nacua. So I kind of feel good about the Niners in that game, specifically their history of playing the Rams, Shanahan versus McVay, and how that series has looked over the years. The 49ers take on my Patriots at home in that would be week 5. Or that would be week 4. Week 4, they take on the Patriots in week 4 in San Francisco. They should be able to take care of business there. And then they play the Cardinals at home. So basically, 4 weeks would be Minnesota, the Rams, the Patriots, and Arizona, the Cardinals at home as well. So you get 2 games against the Cardinals, who don't have a very good defense, the Patriots, who don't have a very good offense, the Rams, who are very beat up, and then tomorrow might actually be the toughest game, believe it or not, against the Vikings in Minnesota. It could be the Rams, but they have so many weapons, as people are mentioning in the chat, that they'll be able to manufacture offense through all these different options. Now, hopefully, because I'm going to this game on October 10th, it's a Thursday night. They play the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. I'm going to this game. So that looks to be the game that Christian McCaffrey could be available to come back. So that would be pretty sweet to get that buzz of CMC back in the backfield. And that's actually a really big game because playing in Seattle is difficult. I know the Niners have owned the Seahawks in recent seasons, but this is now the Mike McDonald Seahawks, who did have a great game plan against the Niners offense just last season. I think the Seahawks are legit in terms of their offensive personnel from a skill standpoint, and their defense should be pretty darn good this year. So that's a tough game. And then they go into a tough stretch where they play Seattle in Seattle. They're back home for the Chiefs in a Super Bowl rematch. They take on Dallas at home. Then they go to Tampa, which they've kind of owned the Bucs, but Tampa looks pretty good. And then they play Seattle again, Green Bay in Green Bay, Buffalo in Buffalo. So you want, McCaffrey available, especially for that stretch run. And then later in the year, of course, for the playoffs. The season ends, a little bit easier. They do play Detroit in a huge game, December the 30th. But yeah, so you kind of want him for that middle stage of the season where you're going to be facing a lot of tough teams. Just getting to the chat real quick, seeing what people think. No worries over here. Back to ring chasing says, Niner girl says, zero reason to panic. Niners will be fine. Kyle says, but he's on the practice squad. Who are you talking about? So we could get him, but I don't see him doing that. Kyle likes his dudes in the building. Ricardo says, it would be awesome if we could weather the storm and CMC and Greenlaw come back later in time for the playoffs. I do think CMC will be back before that. I do think, like I said, if he's not back for Seattle, I think he'll be back within 2 months. I would be shocked if he was not back within an 8-week period, right? You put him on IR for 4 weeks. I know that Achilles tendonitis can be a little bit fragile in terms of like the timeline. It can kind of burst on you at a moment's notice where it's like not the Achilles bursting, but the pain tolerance can kind of come and go. And so we heard that McCaffrey actually had one of his worst days yesterday, which caused them to rethink the IR. He was actually practicing like all the way up to week 1 in a limited capacity. He was practicing all the way up to week 2 in a limited capacity, but they felt like he just needs to lay off and get off of his feet and just rest. So now he's been placed on IR because of it. What's up, Dog Lick? How you doing? We've got, who's in the chat here? Top link in the chat. Shout out to you. Sean in the chat. Shout out to you. Jake in the chat. Deebo back to his old workload. Yeah, so that's something that I want to pivot to. So one thing that I found very interesting about the week 1 game plan and the week 1 game in general was the usage of Deebo Samuel. Not only was he actually running the football, that's kind of obvious to the naked eye, but I felt like one thing that they can do with Deebo, especially if like Ricky Pearsall comes back in a couple of weeks or whatever, like they have Jawan Jennings, they have Brandon Ayuk, they have George Kittle. Given the receiving talent that they do have, you can almost treat Deebo Samuel on like specific third downs and situations as McCaffrey. And what I mean by that is out of the backfield, you can have Deebo kind of become that receiving running back dimension as well. They were actually putting Deebo a lot beside Purdy in the shotgun. And, you could use him in that way where you can motion him out. You can have him in the backfield. You can find mismatches kind of like you do with McCaffrey, but with Deebo, right? So not only can Deebo run the ball, he's dangerous running the ball. You don't always want him running the ball, but you can also use him more importantly in the receiving capacity, right? Kyle says, so bring back the wide back. Exactly. Like you can have him more so in those passing situations when the Niners have to pass. Deebo isn't exactly the best route runner anyways. So having him with a potential mismatch coming out of the backfield against, let's say, safeties or linebackers would be much more advantageous than even having him lined up as a wide receiver. And then you could put Jawan Jennings on the field, maybe Ricky Pearsall on the field, or whoever else you want to put on the field. You could put Kittle in the slot. You could put, Juice at tight end then. You can move all these pieces around. So that to me is where it becomes interesting. In terms of fantasy, we already know that Mason is going to be an absolute smash every week. You've got to start him. I don't know what type of ceiling. Like, I feel like the Jets game is sort of the ceiling here in terms of his ability to score fantasy points. Like, I don't ever see him being a guy like McCaffrey where he's catching like 6 or 7 passes and then he's also running for 100 yards. Like, he's probably going to be more of just the runner and the goal line back, but he was treated as a pure workhorse, which was also pretty interesting. So I do think like he's like, to me, a pretty strong RB2 in fantasy, like in any format. And I feel like the closer you get to standard, he's probably closer to an RB1, just because I don't think he really brings a ton of reception upside outside of a screen or two or a dump off or two. And Purdy's also known for extending plays, scrambling, and looking down the field as opposed to, just checking it down to the back. But that's more so with McCaffrey. And like I said, I think Deebo will be taking a lot of those snaps in pure passing situations where he's actually treated as the RB2 or the third down back, right? So that's interesting. But I feel like Mason is a smash every week. He's got to be in your lineup as your RB2 or your flex, ideally. Then you look at Deebo. I think Deebo is going to skyrocket in terms of fantasy value, probably the most out of all of these pieces, just because we've seen Deebo's usage in the past. Whenever one player on the Niners goes down, Deebo is always the guy that gets more work because Deebo becomes the easy button for the offense. When the offense is restricted personnel, Kyle filters everything through Deebo. So whether it be the running game because of, the McCaffrey not being there to give some touches to somebody else that's more dynamic, they'll give it to Deebo. Goal line touches, they'll give it to Deebo. Receptions that McCaffrey might get, they'll throw a screen to Deebo instead, right? So Deebo kind of becomes the guy where his touches rise, and whenever they have everyone there, he becomes less valuable in fantasy. Brandon Ayuk, I think, pretty much remains the same. I feel like he will probably just start to get things going this week. I expect Ayuk to bounce back in a big way against the Vikings. I don't think anybody, including my guy Stephon Gilmore, can cover Brandon Ayuk one-on-one on the Vikings. I could see him having a big game, especially if Brian Flores decides to blitz and plays man coverage. Ayuk could definitely toast him. So I think Ayuk's motivated after a little bit of a lackluster week 1 where he dropped a touchdown, things like that. So Ayuk will stay the same. Kittle will pretty much stay the same, although you might expect more targets for him just because if Deebo is going to play more of a running back role, I feel like more targets will then go to Kittle because Kittle will probably be designed to get more of those like kind of money routes at the intermediate level and those yak opportunities. If Deebo's playing more so in the backfield, then Kittle could take on more of that Deebo route tree as well. I am very intrigued about, I know that the dude got shot, but I feel like Ricky Pearsall, when he comes back, I think would be very exciting. We actually saw Jawan Jennings take on a pretty big role in week 1 as well. I don't know if that was just a matchup thing against the Jets, being that they have 2 really good perimeter corners in Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, and Jawan Jennings largely played in the slot. I don't know if that was really the case, or if it was because Deebo was playing a lot of running back that he saw more opportunities. But I've always said it, like Jawan Jennings is a wide receiver 2 playing in a wide receiver 3 position. He's clutch. He's reliable. He knows the offense very well. He is actually very deceptively good after the catch as well. He's not as good as Deebo or Ayuk, but he's still really good in that regard. So he could also see some value in deeper formats in fantasy as well. So I just think everyone sees an uptick. I feel like Deebo gets the biggest uptick. Ayuk will get a bounce back. Park says BA had more drops versus the Jets than all of last year. Kyle says don't sleep on Jennings either. He's a dog. I agree with you, man. I just had to get there. We've got to work our way down the list. I think, though, on top of it, like Brock Purdy becomes more of a focal point for attention and like credit. This is kind of a weird thing to talk about, but last year, because McCaffrey was there and because McCaffrey was the offensive player of the year and because CMC was torching the league and scoring a touchdown every game and basically ruining sports books week after week because they had to keep lowering the price on the Christian McCaffrey anytime touchdown, right? Brock Purdy now almost becomes a different level of like, could he actually be the MVP? If he goes on to have a really good stretch of games against good teams, could he go on to like put up great stats? Are they going to pass the ball more? You would expect it. Now, against the Jets, I think it was a game plan thing where they didn't really want to throw the ball too much because the Jets are very strong against the pass. And Kyle clearly saw some areas that he could attack in the running game, and he could definitely penetrate those outside zones, those C gaps, just continue to smash the Jets on the defensive front. And that was clearly a game plan thing. But against teams like the Rams, against teams maybe even like the Vikings, who have a weaker pass defense than they have a run defense, could Brock Purdy be relied upon more to throw the football? And therefore, the media starts talking about, well, look at Purdy. He's doing this without McCaffrey. He's doing this without the offensive player of the year, the guy that we thought was the MVP of the offense. And if Purdy can maybe go toe-to-toe with Josh Allen and those other guys for that award, you know, he could really build up some early steam, especially if they start undefeated and they beat the Vikings and they beat the Rams and they beat the Patriots and they beat the Cardinals without McCaffrey, and they become, you know, on track to get in that top 2 seed range for the NFC. He's going to be discussed alongside the elite quarterbacks, the elite quarterbacks in the NFL for that MVP award. So I think Purdy's a good player. I just still think there is a level that he has yet to reach, both in terms of his play, but also in terms of his recognition. And what I'm more so talking about is recognition here. Obviously, statistically speaking, last year, he was in line with the best quarterbacks in the league outside of, you know, pure touchdown basis, Josh Allen. But other than that, he was right there with everybody. So to me, like, if he does that again without McCaffrey, he's going to put himself into a different stratosphere of attention and MVP candidacy. So if I said that word right. So yeah, Brock Purdy becomes a legitimate option there. Now, Monday Night Football, the defense also showed out. And obviously without McCaffrey, there's going to be pressure on the defense to make plays. I was really impressed with the defense in week 1. I felt like coming into the season, I was saying and spraying that the 49ers defense would be better than last year, because I think that Sorensen understands this personnel and understands this scheme dating back to the Seattle Seahawks days where he coached to a greater and deeper degree. I also feel like the addition of Brandon Staley gives them new ideas, fresh coverage concepts, and throws in layers to help this defense. I also like the additions on the defensive line, Malik Collins, Leonard Floyd, 2 veterans that played really well on Monday night that I think are really going to help. Now, Yetur Gross-Matos comes back this week. I think we could see Hufanga coming back soon. D. Winters could be coming back soon. I thought Devondre Campbell was solid enough in place of Dre Greenlaw. And the corners are a really big improvement. Lenore continues to be a baller. Charvarius Ward is continuing to be a top 5 or 6 corner in football. And Isaac Yiadom, I think, has been really competitive compared to Ambry Thomas. In just one game, I felt like he looked a lot more sticky in coverage. So the defense is going to have to take on a bigger role, obviously without McCaffrey there as well, for those cheap and easy yards and first downs. If the offense isn't quite ticking at a truly elite, borderline all-time level, the defense is going to have to step up compared to last year. And I think they have the capacity to do that this year. I loved how Fred Warner looked in week 1. He was flying around. And if they can get consistent coverage out of their corners, we know that they'll get there with their pass rush. Javon Hargrave even looked better in week 1 than he did in the first year with the Niners. And that could be simply like understanding the system better, being in better condition for this specific scheme, the coaching actually like kind of hitting the right point with what he needs to do in this defense. So a lot of different things there. But yeah, the defense, I think, can definitely carry the load this year a little bit more than they did last year. I was very disappointed with the defense, especially in games like the Patriots game where you're going to be playing an elite defense in that game. So your offense might not be super productive, but you should be able to get some turnovers at home and beat that team. right? Or even in games where you're playing Matt Stafford and you need to get pressure and force some stops, that's going to be a game that, he comes up big. Let's say McCaffrey ends up missing some games against the Seahawks or the Chiefs. Obviously, the Chiefs game is circled for the defense. The defense has never really, been able to rise up in the biggest moment against that team and that quarterback. So that's going to be big. They've done a great job against the Cowboys in the past and the Seahawks. They should be able to dominate the Seahawks offensive line. That's a big mismatch for them. Pooney is a dog as well, says Kyle. Absolutely. The offensive line looked really good in week 1, especially from a run blocking standpoint. But I was impressed with the pass blocking as well. Like last year, obviously, that was one of the bigger weaknesses of the team. That was probably the biggest weakness by far of the offense, was the offensive line in pass protection. Pooney looked the part. I thought McKivitz played better as well, which is huge. It's his second year starting at right tackle in place of McGlinchey there. And they've never really had consistent right tackle play in pass protection, even with McGlinchey. I never thought it was great. So I feel like if he could play better, that's big. But Pooney helps out that right side to be able to even give them a dimension of running the ball to the right a little bit more, because they became so reliant on running to the left with Trent Williams that it gives them a little bit less of a tendency and a little bit less of a kind of like tell in terms of it's 3rd and 1. The defense kind of figures you're going to run behind Trent Williams, but what if you kind of like run to the right now and it's just as successful or nearly as successful? So that's also pretty big as well. We need Feliciano to get healthy too and start him over Brendel. Feliciano, has he ever really been a center in his career? I mean, he played for Buffalo. I thought he was a guard for Buffalo for most of his career. I don't know if he's ever played center at a high level, at least. Maybe he's played in a pinch, but I don't necessarily know, man. You could be right. Like Feliciano played really well for the Niners last year, and him going out in the Super Bowl was like one of the least talked about things that really killed them in the Super Bowl, because that allowed Chris Jones to get, some big pressures in big moments just from communication. But that would be interesting in terms of playing center. Ricardo says, I thought he did for the Giants. You might be right about that, but I would also say that his days with the Giants were probably also his worst days, like in his career. Let me check that out for you. If you guys have any questions about the Niners, any questions about NFL stuff or McCaffrey, let me know in the chat. I'll definitely answer. Simply Official says we will have CMC for the Super Bowl run later. Hopefully he'll be 100%. That's the goal with putting him on IR right now, right? That's the goal, and I totally agree with it. Like, I feel like anytime you're a Super Bowl caliber team, you pretty much know you've got the playoffs on lock. You might even have the division on lock. Like, rest your best players. So yeah, he did play center with the Giants in 2022. Started 15 games at center. But the other so this is why I bring up he played guard, because in 2015 through 2021, which was, I don't know, 6 seasons, he played exclusively guard, it looks like. A lot of right guard. He played left guard in 2021, right guard in 2020, 2019. He did play center in 2022. Let me see what his grade was that year. I'm just kind of curious. Simply says Jordan Mason is great for us. Also, no need to really worry. Yeah, Mason is very good. Obviously, he doesn't bring you the upside in the receiving game as a pass blocker or a pass catcher, but he really understands the offense very well. He's been there for a couple of years now. He's a different kind of back than McCaffrey. He's a stronger, powerful, in between the tackles grinder. Still has some good level of explosion though. Doesn't quite have the vision of McCaffrey, but the guy's a good player. So it's obviously better. It would even be better if they still had Elijah Mitchell, because then they'd have multiple running backs that they could rely on. I'm not quite sure how good the rookie is, but we'll definitely see some touches from him at some point. So I'm just looking at this Feliciano. You guys got me interested now. Let me see. Gary says Mason is a great runner, but not a threat in the passing game like number 23. No, I totally agree with you. Yeah, the rookie. That's why I didn't say his full name. I just know the guy is really fast. That's all I know. He's explosive. So that's also good too, because he kind of gives you a different dimension from Mason, because Mason is, a powerful guy. Yeah, so he did not grade. This is just PFF, but Feliciano did not grade great. He had a 58.2 grade at center in 2022. He actually graded really well for the Niners last year, specifically 87 run blocking grade. That was at guard. He's been kind of like a mid player his entire career, but that would be interesting. I'm not sure. I don't know. Was there any talk of him replacing Brendel on the offensive line? Use Juice more, potentially in some short yardage plays or some pass catching situations. We saw him leak out on a deep pass last week. I think he looked good still. I'm surprised that the guy continues to be able to catch the ball and look that fluid and that athletic at his age. For a fullback, it's pretty impressive. But potentially more as a pass catcher, or even on third down and let's say 3rd and 12, and you just need a guy back there to block. Like they could just put Juice back there just to block guys, right? I wouldn't be surprised by that. All right. I don't have too much else to add other than I think the Niners looked fantastic in week 1. I'm expecting them to play well in week 2. And if everything goes as planned, I think they'll still be undefeated by the time they get McCaffrey back in week number 5 against the Seahawks. And again, at least I'm hoping it will be week 5, because that's when I'm going to watch the 49ers in Seattle. So McCaffrey, amazing player, but the Niners are so talented. They're going to be able to get extra touches for Deebo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk's conditioning will get better. The offensive line looks as good as it's looked in the Shanahan era. And the defense looks like it's going to be better than 2023. So this team, I think, is definitely the favorite in the NFC, but they're trying to save McCaffrey for when the moments matter. And hopefully he can come back at 100% and be the guy that puts the team over the top. So this season for the Niners, given the whole Super Bowl hangover, potential scenario that people want to bring up, this season is all about remaining healthy, because what really derailed them in 2020 was health. If that team was healthy, they would have been good too, right? So, that's the season. 2019, they lost to the Chiefs. They got derailed by injuries in 2020. They're trying not to replicate that. They're trying to take it slow. They're trying to pace themselves. Hopefully they've done the right thing here with McCaffrey. So yeah, guys, thanks for watching. If you don't already follow me on BR Bleacher Report, make sure to follow me for more live streams on the Niners and the rest of the NFL. I cover all 32 NFL teams. And if you want to find me for more content elsewhere, I'm on YouTube, TheBottomLineView. I cover all 32 NFL teams. I give my picks. I do bets. I do a lot more. So live streams on Sundays. So make sure to check that out, guys. Thanks for watching. It's Mitch. We'll see you next time. Peace.